give another thank you is to Karen Nelson and Mary Ganzon, who are our tech hosts for tonight. Yeah. And Diana Londoño Garcia is not here. I think I got her name right. She's usually here, but she's traveling. She's on the road. And so Monica is putting in the chat box. So we did decide to create a listserv so we can communicate if there's anything to communicate between sessions. And 40 of you have signed up for the listserv, which is great. So if any of you are interested in being on that, I think Monica just put her email address in the chat box. So send her your contact info if you want to. And I just want to say thank you to Monica. That's another thank you for doing that work. And to those of you who signed up. And then Lisa has suggested, thank you for the suggestion, that she has some questions and other people might have questions. So I'm looking to see at the bottom, I don't see a question button on my thing. So
we don't have that on Zoom. That's in Crowdcast.
Oh, okay. All right. So when we get to that point, you might just have to raise your hand, and we'll try to get to as many as we can, and we'll try to save some time at the end. If we don't get to all of them, we'll get to them next time. And so I'm trying to see, it looks like somebody said they had a show in.
I do. It's Mary.
Okay, so what is that?
Let me. Hey. Can you see me now? Is that what's?
I can't. I see your name, but that's it. Oh, that may be another Mary, because that Mary's got her audio off.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, Mary, while you are looking for that, to try to figure out a way to let us see you.
I think that it was Mary who now has their audio off.
Okay.
So maybe they'll be back.
So Byron, did you have a question?
Yes, I have artwork I just completed, but how can I share it with you people? What do I have to push on the?
I have no idea.
A share screen? Is that it?
I guess so.
Maybe you could just hold it up to your camera first. Oh, you can't. It's not. It's in your computer.
Yeah. Well.
Oh. Is that it behind you?
No, that's another image.
I know how you can do it. It's how I've put my Tara up in the background of me.
Okay.
I purchased this image.
Okay.
It's the white Tara.
Yeah.
With a, I use it to meditate.
Oh, good.
Where the, she's holding a vajra in one hand and a bell in the other.
Yeah.
The vajra is up high by her heart and the bell is down further and it's inverted.
Oh.
So it's almost like the shape of a vagina in a sense that the vajra is kind of phallic as well. So it's sort of like a male and female combination in the same image.
Well, I want to, oh, there's Mary.
I'm trying to get it in the shot. Can you see it at all?
Yeah, I can.
It's a It's a Buddha touching the earth. It's a shrine from Burma,
Okay.
early 1900s. So I just thought
It's
Nice.
beautiful.
I thought of us, the Bhumi Sparsha, to
Yeah.
explain what it meant.
Yeah. So Bhumi Sparsha is the name of the Sangha that hosts us, Lama Rod Owens and Lama Justin. And the word Bhumi Sparsha means touch the earth. And you can see in Mary's artwork, the hand of the Buddha is reaching down and touching the earth. That's beautiful, Mary. Thank you. Appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Wow. Yeah, Byron.
I've been meditating for about 6 months up at Wonderwell once a week. And I signed up for Rod
Okay.
Owens' retreat that he's going to be giving in
Good.
August.
Excellent.
And when I went up to meditate there, I was just struck with this incredible statue of Tara that they have in the meditation room. And I was determined to find out more about it. So I bought your book and I read it, and you know, I love the image. Of course, I've got some sort of background in art, and but I don't see her as a deity, but more, well, not as a personified deity.
Right. That's true.
But as an inspirational and devotional image instead.
Yeah. Well, stick with us. Give it a ride. See how it goes tonight, and see what you learn, and see what you learn about what you already know too. So anyway, I'm glad you're here. So I wanted to also say that to ask if there's some general consensus about people wanting to start again when we get to the end of this cycle.
Yes.
Yes, please.
Yes. Another yes.
Okay.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes, please.
Yes, please.
And that's a big please from a long way away.
Oh my God. Well, I think it's a good thing, because I think that things are incredibly difficult, and I really don't get that they're going to get much easier anytime soon. So what I want to say is next month we will be meditating on the 21st Tara, which is the end of the cycle. The month after that, I've mentioned this before, but the month after that, we're going to do a little bit different practice, where we're going to go through all 21 and read the praises and the mantras. I have to think about that a little bit more, but that will be a way of having all the 21 in one place at one time. And then I have to think a little bit. So I want to, this was the other thing, another announcement I want to suggest to you all, is to look at my teacher, Lodrö Rinpoche's website, which is ganden.ch, GANDEN.ch, and Mary can put that in the chat box too. And when you go, if you just Google that, you'll get a German version and an English version. If you happen to land on the German version by accident, I think it's in the upper left-hand corner, there's a tiny little flag. There's a German flag and a British flag. So if you click on the British flag, it'll convert into English.
I put it in that chat.
Yeah. And so there are several new Tara offerings that Rinpoche is giving. One is online, and in the spring, in March 2023, he's giving the initiations into the 21 Taras according to the Surya Gupta tradition. So that's a little unusual. Like if you were to ever have the occasion to take the initiation into this tradition, which follows Atisha, you can essentially be initiated into all 21 on the same day. It takes several hours. I mean, that's how it works. But with the Suryagupta tradition, there's a separate initiation for each one of the 21 Taras. So it takes over a week to do it. It's in person. It's not online. I'm pretty sure it's not online. And the Taras have multiple arms, multiple instruments. It's a little more complicated. There's a lot of, basically, there's a lot of generating yourself as Tara as opposed to seeing Tara in time. So I just wanted to mention that to you all to look at it. What I do not know is that with these initiations often comes a commitment. And so I don't know what the commitments for this initiation are. And sometimes they can be pretty extensive. You know, if I do this, I'm committed to doing X number of mantras or X number of practices, X number of times a week, etc. So I don't know about that. And then the other thing I want to say is we're going to continue what we've been doing with the sadhanas according to Atisha. So I won't be teaching, at least unless Tara knocks me over the head with something I'm not anticipating. I won't be teaching those practices. So in some ways I was a little hesitant to suggest it because, you know, it's not like, well, there's going to be some follow-up here. And it might be worth, you know, writing to whoever is at Gondon and asking about that to see what that is. You know, if the commitments are something extraordinarily simple, something you felt you could do, the one reason I would recommend it is you just would learn a lot. So Suryagupta lived, I don't know, 200 or 300 years before Atisha, and you can really see how his work is really the basis in a way for what Atisha did. Atisha really simplified it and actually made it more available, I think, in the 11th century. And then we're making it more available now. It really would deepen your knowledge of Tara, but I think it's something to really think about, which is why I didn't just write you and say, hey, this is happening, you might want to do it. But I did want to invite you to look at the website and see if anything really does call to you. And then you can sort of proceed from there. So I think that's the end of the announcement section. So I think what I would like to do is have another beginning. And I would like to ring this bell, which I don't know how well you can hear it through the Zoom setup. But I would like to ring the bell and then just take a moment to move out of this announcement section into sort of a more internal state. And we're just going to rest for a moment before we really get started. So with the sound of the bell, I just suggest that you know, if a deep breath is kind of there and waiting for you to breathe it, you know, do that and sit back and just take a moment. Okay, here we go. So if you were to think of this really and truly as a moment of resting, and as a moment of really feeling your deep connection to the elements. You know, we are made up of the elements, but the elements are all around us and are supporting our lives in every second. And one way to do that, or to start with that, is to actually let your body really connect with whatever you're sitting on. Feel the point of contact with the chair, the sofa, the floor, however you're sitting. And imagine that you can let go and let whatever you're sitting on hold you. You don't have to hold yourself up. And whatever you're sitting on is made up of earth elements, and the earth is underneath us. You know, I've got wooden floors under my feet, but not far below these wooden floors is the earth herself. I have a glass of water here. I've got a little fire with a candle burning. You know, the air and space is all around us. So just let yourself be aware of the internal and the external ways in which the elements are sacred, and we are them and they are us. And we can just feel the support of the elements also. Yeah, and as you do that, just resting into that support, you may find that a prayer to Tara arises for yourself or someone else, like some intention for this practice. You may even think ahead of time, you know, I actually want to dedicate this practice to a person or a place or a series of events. See if anything like that comes to you. And then bring yourself back. Yeah, bring yourself back. And, you know, the other thing, you know, if you look around at the people in these little squares, to realize we're supported by each other, no matter where we are. This song is a tremendous source of support for all of us. And to let yourself feel that. So, I was just saying before we started to Mary and Karen that this Tara is especially meaningful to me. I mean, I say that about all of them, but anyway, this one really is especially meaningful to me. And I'll say more about that. And I also want to say that there's an element of this that is really intense, because she's the Tara who protects from all illnesses. And, you know, the practice doesn't just talk about illnesses, it also talks about epidemics. And so I think that really invites us to be aware of the epidemics that we're facing, also be aware of the intersectionality of these epidemics, and to also be aware of how long-standing many of them are. So, you know, if you start with, you know, what's the most obvious is COVID and how that has impacted all of our lives. and how it really does continue to impact all of our lives, even though with the vaccines and the medications, and it's not as intense as it was initially, but it's still there. And all of us wish it weren't. And some of us are more vulnerable than others. And so there's still, COVID is still with us, with all its variants. And then you may be reading in the newspaper about monkeypox, and then there's some other things kind of showing up. And that's one. But I kind of want to list several others, and I also want to briefly talk about their intersectionality. And I want to say it's a little bit heavy, and some, well, it's more than a little bit heavy. And I think in these kinds of ways, when we're really looking squarely at something, sometimes what can arise is a sense of helplessness, whether it's personal about our own lives. And so, please, Susan has put that into the chat box about the epidemics of wildfires and drought. So you're welcome, drought. You're welcome to put anything in there that you want to as you listen to what I'm saying. And what I want to say before I even do that, though, is that this Tara has some very particular language, both the praise and the mantra, the energy of this practice, the images that it brings forward, that really do offer us ways of thinking about what we actually can do. And sometimes those things are small, and sometimes they're a little bigger. Sometimes it's one individual thing we can do, but sometimes it's participating in something bigger, or connecting with other people who are doing something. So the ones I particularly want to mention, and I really do appreciate you all, adding in other ones, is this destruction of our planet, this epidemic of objectifying both people and animals and plants and the air and all the elements, so that what's happening is that in some instances we are actually destroying interconnected webs of ecosystems, and those ecosystems have their own natural immune systems, actually. And so we are destroying some of the immunity systems on the planet when we destroy these ecosystems. And, in that rubric, we also have the mistreatment of animals, which is on an epidemic level, whether it's things like the wolves in the Northern Rockies that the hunters just can't kill enough of, or whether it's factory farming, or whether it's when you say the word animal, think everything. Think insect, think reptiles, think mammals, birds. I realize these are all different categories, but just the extinction of species, this sort of epidemic level of what I would say is insensitivity and disconnection. And I'm going to come back to all of these. I'm just going to sort of put them out there. But the other thing, which is just this incredibly baked in systems of violence and oppression and inequality in this country that are just staggering. And as you look at any one of these epidemics, what I see, and you would too, is that every single one of them have a worse impact on people of low income and people of color than anybody else. So there's another kind of intersectionality, and systemic racism is certainly part of that. So, in the Buddhist teachings, they talk about the three poisons: hatred, ignorance, and greed. Those three poisons, that's a very classic teaching. We really see the evidence of that all around us. And it can be incredibly disheartening, if not heartbreaking. Ignorance in that system is really talking about the being ignorant of the interconnectedness of all life. Once you get that, once you really get that, and you really get that your life and everyone you care about, whether it's your own children or relatives or friends or your pet, that once you get or your favorite tree, you get the interconnectedness of life, you start wanting to support all of life. And these distinctions between self and other really begin to blur, so that projection out of hatred onto other diminishes. And greed, which is certainly driving a lot of this, a lot of the sort of, using the earth as a source of extraction and sales, if you want to put it that way, as opposed to a living being that's supporting all these other living beings that we want to honor and love and care for. So I think that this ancient teaching about these three poisons, hatred, ignorance, and greed, are quite salient here. So one of the things, I promise you, I'm not going to leave you in this depressing atmosphere, but it is good to really look at this stuff that when I was looking back, I like to look back. I've taught this stuff for many, many years, and the other groups do what we're going to do, which is we get to the end and we start over. So I can look back at all the times in different years that I've taught it. And in 2011, one of the notes I made, that's 11 years ago, was that the CDC had identified child abuse as the #1 public health crisis in America. And for those of you who live in the United States, I'm sure you've read this or heard this. It's just hard to even say it out loud or even believe it, that the leading cause of death in children and adolescents is gun violence. So, when there are more guns than people, I think like 400 million is the latest estimate, you can't say that that's anything other than an epidemic. And I guess I imagine you all are like me too. You're driving from here to there in the car and you're listening to NPR. That's where I get a lot of my information. And the other day, yes, actually the day before yesterday, I was driving home and they were interviewing somebody from the Brady, the nonprofit, the Brady Organization Against Gun Violence. And they've done this profound research about what gun violence actually costs the United States every year. And it was something like $550 billion a year that gun violence is costing the United States. And she listed off, all the different costs. And then she said, and this doesn't even include things like the cost of a child never wanting to go back to school again, or people's lost jobs, or people not wanting to go back to their jobs. I mean, she just made this long list of the things that number didn't cover. So, it's just incredible. And I don't know about you, but I feel like for me, what's really, really hard, and this is why I cannot say enough about how grateful I am for meditation practice, but in particular for tantric practice and for Tara practice, is that it's one thing to even let these facts sink in, but then the other piece of it, which is that this politicization of the epidemic, the pandemic, and also the fact that the majority of our politicians in Congress don't care about these gun violence deaths and the costs and so on and so on. Apparently, they don't care, because if they did, they would pass legislation to do something about it. And so this is when I'm like, reach for the practice, because the thing that really is not going to be useful is if I start othering the people that I, want to project all this onto, right? And if I spend my time with all these negative emotions. So yeah, it's really helpful to have this practice where we can just broaden our scope. Just, Anji has written a really interesting thing in here in the chat box. My youngest son says one of the places he felt the safest was in Norway, where the police have to call and ask permission to use firearms. That's amazing. I didn't know that. Thank you for that. So, yeah, you guys are putting some great stuff into the chat box. So I just recommend, the addiction to fossil fuel and extractive economies, just to really keep reading what's in the chat box, because I can't say them all. Another thing I really wanted to lift up, and this has just stayed with me ever since I read it in different places, actually, these quotes by Mother Teresa. And they're from a few years ago, but not that far back. She said, the greatest disease today, the greatest epidemic or disease today is not tuberculosis or leprosy. It is being unloved, unwanted, and uncared for. And she said, many people are dying for a piece of bread, but many more people are dying for a little love. So I want to put that out there, but I want to comment on what Mary just put in the chat box, because it was part of what I wanted to say. So thank you for saying it for me, which is the epidemic of misogyny. And so I want to talk about that in a very particular way, because I think in some ways what we can see is that, I would say, I don't know, somewhere in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 years of saying that women are not human, women can't become enlightened. Thank you, Tara, for straightening that out. That women have no rights to anything. The denigration of women that's been going on for several thousand years. The loss of the goddess figures and the idea of the divine as feminine that happened over those thousands of years. It has a huge impact on mothers. It has a tremendous impact on mothers. And, in the modern era, it is true that in some cases, the fathers are the primary caregiver, but that is really recent and it's still fairly rare. So if we've spent 5,000 years telling women they're worthless, basically, and they are the mothers, they're having the babies, they're raising the babies, and those are boys and girls. This is a tremendous, deep, cultural, karmic, intergenerational trauma of thousands of years in the making. And again, talk about something that's baked in. And so in my world, I mean, I live in many worlds, as you all do, but in the world of psychology, psychotherapy, and these new developments that have been occurring, thank goodness, just amazingly wonderful new developments, like somatic experiencing therapy, which Mary can tell you all about, polyvagal therapy. But I want to say, back in the 80s, this was actually a psychoanalytic researcher, was the one who really did, true double-blind research, the whole thing, and was able to prove that infants actually know their mothers from the minute they're born. So, this idea that, infants have blurred vision and blah, 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 that's true. But infants recognize the sound of their mother's voices. I can't tell you all the biology behind all this, but women, children, babies know their mother from the time they're born. And the other thing that has become incredibly clear is that the mother's gaze is one of the most important thing in a baby and a toddler and a child, an infant, whatever life. It's, the gaze of the mother. So, you can even think about that a little bit. Like, what is it like to have someone look at you and really look at you and really see you and look at you in a very loving way? It's a pretty incredible thing. And if that doesn't happen, it's devastating. It's truly devastating. So if you have mothers that, well, and again, here it comes that intersectionality. If you have mothers that don't have enough money to take care of their children, right? Or if they don't have health care themselves, or, they're completely stressed out, or they have postpartum depression, that people can really experience some very deep and lasting, you could call them wounds in our Buddhist language, which I actually really like. I like this term, which I think I mentioned last time, negative karmic impressions. It's like you can really get this impression if you're not being seen, if you're not being looked at, if you're not being treated with tenderness, a very deep somatic impression can get made that I'm not lovable. And I think somewhere this is even where we do have an epidemic of negative self-talk. You could even say self-loathing and self-hatred in the West. And innumerable of the Tibetan lamas have commented on that, including His Holiness. So I think, thank goodness there have been lots of mothers who've been fine and have been able to do these things and do a wonderful job, but many, many have not been able to do that. And the mother-daughter relationship, many people, there are lots of daughters on this call, and I'm certainly one of them. You can really attest to how problematic that can be for some people. So one thing that's really been helpful to me about all that, and really I haven't even read the whole book, it's been around for a while, but I love the title of it. The title of it is It Didn't Start With You. And this person is really saying, you have to look at your ancestors and you have to look at what happened to your ancestors. And some of you know what happened to your ancestors. Some of you don't. I know what happened to mine, but only a few generations back. So, I just know about what my mother experienced as a child, which was really colossal losses and a lot of fear. And the same thing was true of her mother. So I think it's like, and again, here, when we do these practices, this is one of the things that I think is just amazing, because when we do our circle of care, we call in our teachers, but we also call in the ancestors who have our best interests, who love us and have our best interest in mind. So we call in the helpful, compassionate, and loving ancestors. So, and the teachers. And in that moment, and when we do the practice tonight, I'm really going to emphasize this. It's a moment in the practice where we can really stop and remember these people. In many cases, we did know some of these people. We can remember the times we felt loved And that might be by a relative, or it might be by a teacher, or, you know, it could be by anybody. But we can really remember those times of being loved, and we can call those people in and take a moment to feel that. So one of the things that Lama Rod said on the Medicine Buddha practice this past Monday night, which I don't think I've heard him say before, but boy, it really landed with me, that he said, it's really out of this energetic crucible of love that the consciousness of the deity arises. And I want to say that again. It's out of this crucible of love that we're calling in, we're becoming aware it really is there. We may have forgotten, but it really is there. And when we call it in, it's a reminder that it is there. It is out of that crucible of love that the conscious deity, the consciousness of the deity arises. And so when he said that, I thought, and I wanted to say this to y'all, you know, the idea in the Vajrayana Buddhist world is that we all are already Tara. You know, we don't know it. There are all kinds of obstacles to our sensing that as a felt sense of truth, right? That part of why we practice is to dissolve these obstacles so that that felt sense of knowing that Tara consciousness is inside of me. This is kind of what Byron was talking about earlier. So that occurred to me when Lama Rod said that, it's like out of that crucible of love, our own consciousness of Tara can also arise. So I want you all to contemplate that and maybe work with that some tonight, and also, you know, when you're doing your practice otherwise. So the other thing that I think is really possible is when we are doing two things. One is the four immeasurables at the beginning, and the other is the dedication at the end. You know, the four immeasurables, which where we're saying, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. Well, happiness, that word in this context actually means the realization of the interconnectedness of all being. It's really enlightenment. And we're wishing that for everyone. So we can wish that for our ancestors. We can wish it for the unhealed ancestors. You know, we don't necessarily call them in, but we can still have these deep wishes for their well-being. And, you know, if you like, you can also dedicate your practice in part to their healing. And you know, I can't say that I know how this works because I don't have those kind of abilities, but I often like to imagine that the awakened ones and the enlightened ones and the healed ancestors can help the ones who are still working on that in these other realms. So I think these are some of the elements of the practice that we can actually really rely on and can really help us not get kind of bogged down in what it feels like when you really think about all these epidemics. And I also want to say, sometimes I wish you all could come to my house. I wish you could walk right up to this painting of Tara. I know if you've got the book, you've got the photograph of this painting of Tara. But when you get right up close to it, what it actually looks like, this artist is just so incredible to me, but it's almost like she took some kind of very light blue paint. It's almost like there's this delicate little rim. Looks like it could even be tears that are forming right under her lower eyelid. And I mean, you know, there are lots and lots of images of Tara out there. I just happen to think this is one of the most beautiful ones I've ever seen. And when I look at this image and imagine that she's looking back at me, that's a place where you can actually invite the gaze of the mother, the cosmic mother. And yeah, and I think it's one of the places where in this this world where our relative reality and the absolute reality can meet. It can bring the real pain of whatever. And, you know, maybe some of you all had wonderful mothers. I hope so. My mother was a very troubled person. Let me put it that way. I often like to tell my clients that when they say, you know what I mean? And I say, yes, it's not because I read a lot of books. So the work of not dissociating from the experiences in the relative, but also not dissociating from the experience of the absolute, and to really bring the two of those together. Karen was talking about this earlier. It's like that's part of our work, that little tiny space between those two places and going back and forth between them. But I think it's one of the things I would really invite you to do, is to consciously imagine that you are receiving Tara's gaze. So I think what I want to do is talk about the praise and the mantra, because sometimes the praise and the mantra aren't just so incredibly interconnected. Here they really are, because I think they also offer us a sense of this is where some healing can happen. And I do want to say too that in every instance that you can recall really having felt loved by someone, in every instance that you can feel having been seen or cared for, and if that comes alive in the practice, or something about the practice brings it alive, no matter what your experience is, and you think about letting that like literally root into your DNA, because our DNA actually changes while we're still alive. So it's like, if we're thinking about long-term transgenerational traumas may have come down to us through several generations, we can also think of this practice as some like epigenetic or current way of working to transform these deep imprints. And the neurobiologists would love to talk to you about how that's actually possible. So I just want to say, before I talk about the mantra and the praise, which really speaks to this, I want to show you this picture of Mother Mira, which came from around the time that, maybe a few years after I met her. I don't know if you can see her in this orange, sorry. So when I saw her for the first time in 1992 in Germany, all this stuff about orange, I mean, it was just orange here, orange there, orange everywhere. I didn't know anything about Tara at that point. I'm like, well, this is really pretty funny, including a friend of mine and I were walking around this old cemetery in this village where we were staying. And there was a statue, I don't know if it was a Mary or if it was an angel, you know, around this grave. And there was an iron picket fence, you know, with the dagger-like things on the end around this statue and this grave. And somehow on the top of the head of that statue was half an orange peel. So anyway, so I had really associated Mother and orange for a long time. And Mother now will answer some questions if she's traveling or, you know, with people. But for decades, she didn't talk to anybody. I mean, she talked to a few people in her, you know, close circle. And that was a very small group of people. But still to this day, she doesn't give teachings. The way she works with people is she looks at them. And so everything that she transmits comes through her gaze. It comes through these two eyes that are so dark, they almost look black. So this idea that the gaze of the mother, I mean, you know, in the Indian, I guess it's Sanskrit word, I don't know, for that is darshan. The way she gives darshan is by looking at you. And I don't think that's really any accident. So the way that used to happen when you would see her in person, whether it was in Germany or the United States, is every person kneels in front of her and she looks directly into your eyes. And then you try to stand up and get back to your seat, which is always an interesting achievement. And then you go on in meditation, but she doesn't talk. So whatever your experience is your experience, and whatever religious tradition you bring to it, it's all your experience. So I just wanted to say that because, well, you'll see why. Because so let's look at the praise for a minute. It says, I praise the one who is radiant with the light of her two eyes, full like the sun and moon, who eliminates the fiercest epidemics by reciting Hara 2 times and Tutari. And so Hara is a Sanskrit word. And I want to say that my source for all this, where's this book, is this book, Tara's Enlightened Activity, by the Dzogchen Lamas, Sherab and Dongyal. It's floating around here somewhere, but one of the things I love to do is just review these different sources from different teachers, their comments on these various Taras. And so this is my source for this, but they are saying that the word Hara actually has 2 meanings. It means, it can mean take away, but can also mean take in. And so in this praise, where it says, radiant with the light of her 2 eyes, full like the sun and moon. So the idea is, it's like the sun is taking away delusions, is burning up the stuff we don't want, ill health, illness. And the moon is taking in the light, is healing. It's like the full moon. And of course, the moon in so many traditions of Buddhism also is a symbol of enlightenment, and it's often associated with female deities, etc. So the idea is that this gaze of hers, this, you know, one eye being like the sun, the other like the moon, is like part of the gaze is really dissolving all the obstacles, the illness, the ill health, the delusions of separateness, etc. And the other gaze is like the moonlight that you can really take in, and it brings health back. So, and then Tutari has so many different meanings, but one of them is the supreme joy of realizing that everything is interconnected. So the mantra, Om Tari Tutari Jasara Vijadi Zora Prashamaniye Soha. So Vija, again, is a Sanskrit word, and like Hebrew, these words can mean many different things, and so you have to take the meaning from the context. So Vija can mean wisdom, it can also mean illness, it can mean imprints, and in this case, it actually means illness. And Prasha Maniye means destroy, and Zora means bring back to health. So the mantra is really similar to the praise in that it's really saying that what we're asking Tara to do when we recite this mantra, or, you know, some people really prefer just to listen to it, and some people like to alternate. So whatever feels the best to you, but if you're saying it or hearing it or feeling it, what we're really asking her to do is destroy illness and then to bring us back to health. And so what I want to really add to that is that we can think about all these different kinds of epidemics, not just the physical ones, or the health, particular body ones, but all these epidemics that I've named and many of you have put in the chat box as well. And that we can really ask for healing for whatever negative impressions we may have been left with, for the ways in which we maybe were not seen, or the times in which we really needed to be seen and weren't. And to also really understand that through these practices and through other things, therapy and body work and whatever, there's so many ways that we can literally come into being, that we can be seen, and that we can also see ourselves. And I think another thing that's extraordinarily important is that it really reminds us, and this is the part I think when we think, well, what can I do about all this? Well, we can do lots of different things about all this, but the one thing we really can do is see other people. We can be really careful when we're talking to somebody that we're really listening to them, that we're really looking at them. And, that can be, again, a friend, a loved one, a family member. But it can also be a stranger. So Byron is asking which one of the 21 Taras we're talking about. It's the 20th one, the orange Tara, who protects from all illnesses. So I think it's easy, especially in this current moment that we're living in, which is really pretty scary. It can be easy to think what we do doesn't matter. But if you can remember the times when a particular person did a particular thing for you and it may have changed your life, or it certainly may have changed it in the moment, then please know that you may be that person for someone else, and to kind of be on the lookout for that. So one of the things that I kind of like to tell this story. So one of my teachers from the Jewish world, Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi, this is like show and tell, folks. I don't know if you can see this. I'm going to take it out of the frame. Maybe I'm going to take it out of the frame. It might be stuck to the glass. It is. So I don't know if you can see this. This is Reb Zalman. With this big smile on his face. So I was fortunate to know him pretty well. He knew me pretty well, certainly. And I remember one time at his house in Colorado, and we had this lengthy thing. And I mean, he just knew all this stuff. And it was time to go. And we stood up, and so he said, "Okay, give me a hug." He just gave me this big hug. And he's not that much taller than me, but he's been gone now for about 8 years. So he was a very full-chested, barrel-chested guy with such a vibrant personality. Anyway, he gave me this big hug, and he stood back and he looked at me and he goes, okay, I know that wasn't enough. Give me another hug. So it was really like he knew that part of me. He knew that part of me. And in that moment, I did not feel like he was making fun of that. I felt like he was acknowledging it in the most robust, friendly, loving way. And so that's one of my favorite memories of a particular moment, a particular person where I really felt loved, And then after he died, and it takes a year before you unveil the tombstone of a Jewish person, the unveiling of his grave marker, whatever you want to call it, the sentence on it says, "He loved us to God." And he did. He loved lots of people to God. So, you may not know it, but you may be loving people to Tara. we don't know who we're loving people to, but I think it's good to kind of keep that in mind. And that, okay, so I'm sort of famous for this is the last thing I'm going to say, but anyway, you know that it never is. Stephen Porges, for those of you who know something about polyvagal theory, I sat through 6.5 hours of continuing education with him last Friday. And he was talking about really in different language, but he was talking about the same thing, how children, little children in situations of abuse and trauma and neglect will attune their entire nervous system completely, really attune it to threat. And so often then the whole world can feel threatening. And, you know, that part of our work is to retune our nervous system so that it can really perceive the love that's there. And that could be from the hummingbird that lands on the feet, or it can be from a person or a pet. And it can also be from a meditation practice. I think, and particularly, I really like to encourage people, you know, with your TAR practice or any other practice you do that really means a lot to you, to truly think of it as a source of refuge, not as a job to do, not as a thing. If you didn't do it today, you're not a good person or you're a lousy practitioner. You know, to really think of your practice as a profound source of refuge. And, you know, some days you might want to kind of consciously make your own short practice if you don't have time to do the whole thing. I often say to people, if you call in your teachers and you go through the refuge prayers in a very intentional way, say a few mantras, you know, that you can do that in 10 minutes and you've done a great practice. So yeah, I really want to invite you to think of all this as a place of refuge and healing and reattunement. It's like you're reattuning yourself to your own Buddha nature, which is a pretty great thing. Okay, so how are we doing? It's at 8:11. Yeah, there's one other thing I want to mention, but I think I'm going to mention it at the end instead of now, which is a wonderful book about contemplation related to crisis by Barbara Holmes, who's a wonderful African-American theologian and contemplative practitioner. So I'll talk about it at the end. So I just want to ask, and thank you, Yael. May his memory be a blessing. Yeah, absolutely. And the praise and the mantra are in the chat box. Yeah, some great comments in the chat box. So I hope you guys are reading that as we go along. This epidemic of disconnection and alienation. So this is certainly a way of bringing ourselves back into connection. And yeah, with ourselves and with each other. So let's practice together. And, you know, I hope if there's anything anybody wants to say right now, please do that. And if not, I'm going to ask you to comment at the end about what Sarah, go ahead. Oops, you disappeared. How did you do that?
Got it. I don't know.
Okay.
Am I back?
Yeah.
Okay. This morning in my email, I found an anecdote from I'm not sure where this took place, but it was in the United States, on a public transportation system. This enormous man, giant 6'5" man, was losing it on the train and becoming more and more distraught and like cursing and saying threatening things, and just obviously in great emotional pain. And the people on the train were getting afraid. And this little old lady, somebody took a picture of them together, came over and took his hand and just kept holding his hand. And he gradually settled down. There's a picture of him with his head bent, and just this little old lady has got his hand. She won't let go. And finally he settles down, and I guess she gets to where she's going, and he says to her, "Thank you, Grandma." Isn't that just the sweetest thing?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. It's to the point, exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Anybody else before we jump in? Okay, well, you're going to have a second chance. So, so I invite you at this point again to revisit one of those beginnings where I was really suggesting that you just really feel the support of what you're sitting on and the earth beneath your feet and your chair and your furniture in your house, your apartment, wherever you are. In the realm of the relative, to just really feel the support of your physical embodied self. One of these astonishing ways that we show up in this world. And you can let your attention rest on your breathing for a minute, not in the sense of changing anything or doing anything in particular. Just noticing the air moving and how it's moving in your body. And then to get in your mind's eye an image of space, whether it's these new images from the James Webb Telescope or whether it's the sky over the ocean, or it could be just the sky, outside your house, but to allow an image of the vastness of space to arise in your mind's eye, and know that as you're doing that, that is actually an image of your own awakened consciousness. It is really that vast, and that it contains absolutely everything that ever was or is or will be. And that we're breathing into and out of that space. It's another way we're connected. And then there's this vast space inside of us. And then to know that what space also contains is infinite possibility. It's so important not to forget that. And that what we're going to invite to arise out of space in this moment is Green Tara and her entire mandala of all the 21 emanations around her. And that all of these beings are appearing in subtle bodies of light, various colors of light, but all of them are appearing in subtle bodies of light, and they are really outer reflections of an inner reality, because we too have a subtle body of light. And in this case, it's an image of an awakened female Buddha who claimed for herself and taught all other people that yes, women can become enlightened, as well as men, that there's no difference in that dimension anyway. And so we just let our gaze fall upon Tara in the middle and all the others, and be really aware of her gaze falling on us. And see how that is for you. If you're a good visualizer, you know, to really imagine that you're looking into her eyes, she's looking back. And if you're not, just think about that, you know, just think about what it's like to gaze into someone's eyes and to really feel them looking back at you. And how nourishing and grounding that can be. And then to imagine that Tara is surrounded by all of your teachers and your helpful ancestors. And to think about who those teachers are specifically. Many of them may be Tibetan Buddhists, some of them may come from other traditions, some of them may be living now, some of them may not. But you know who they are. I mean, honestly, it could have been a high school teacher that without her, you don't even know how you have landed where you are now. Just think of these teachers, these caring, compassionate, loving beings, and really feel their care and love for you, and that you can radiate your gratitude back to them. And then imagine that you're surrounded by your friends and loved ones and supporters, and they are surrounded by their friends and loved ones and supporters. And that just goes on until you can sense or feel or imagine there's just an infinite number of beings who are in this practice with us and receiving the benefit of it. And then to imagine that you can place at Tara's feet, you can put yourself, if there's some particular thing or things you're concerned about. You can place any of your loved ones, or you can place any groups of people or places in the world. You can certainly place the people who are struggling with all these different pandemics and epidemics that we've mentioned tonight, that we've brought into our collective consciousness together tonight, in a sense, bearing witness to that. Just to imagine we can actually literally give it all to the mother, that we can place all of this at Tara's feet. And then we think with all these beings and for all these beings that we really are taking refuge. We're taking refuge in the awakened consciousness that Tara embodies and represents. And we're taking refuge in the Dharma, or all the teachings of all the wisdom traditions that really have meant something to us. And we're taking refuge in the Sangha. And that's our group here, this group tonight, but all of us belong to other groups, and they could be in other traditions as well. And we can also take refuge in the lineage sanghas. You know, when you think about this practice being, I don't know, 14, 15, 1600 years old, and to think about all the people, all the groups of people who've kept these practices alive in one form or the other, we can take refuge in that lineage of teachers and sanghas as well. And so we go for refuge. You know, the language is usually the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha, but we can really expand that. And then we ask that through the power of giving and the other perfections, that we might wake up 100% in order to be of benefit both to ourselves and to all living beings. And then with a lot of intention and concentration, we really ask that all beings would have happiness and the causes of happiness, that all beings would be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow, that all beings could actually come to realize we cannot be separated from the sacred happiness which is sorrowless. this basic awakened nature that permeates everything. And that we might live in equanimity without attachment for those we hold close, or aversion for those we keep at a distance. That we could live believing in the equality of all that lives. Om Sabhavashita Saradharma Sabhavashtoham. So that is the mantra of emptiness. It reminds us once again of the open space and the vastness of everything and everything that can arise out of that space. And so now what we're going to do is imagine that this particular emanation of Tara, orange Tara, who protects from all illnesses, is coming into the foreground where we can really focus on her. And she actually has a peaceful expression. She's holding this orange vase. We can imagine her top 3 chakras adorned with the syllables Om Aham. You can certainly imagine those in English script if you don't know the Sanskrit or the Tibetan, which most of us don't. But these syllables, Om Aham, are in her crown, her throat, and her heart chakra. We just see her with that right hand extended in the gesture of supreme giving, and her left hand at her heart in the gesture of refuge. And that right foot forward, ready to come to our assistance. That's a lot that we can take in just by looking at her, this brilliant, subtle body of orange light. And then we imagine that the blue syllable hum in her heart begins to radiate this beam of blue light that goes from her heart into the other realms, into these other realms very close by, the realms of the wisdom beings, the initiatory deities, and invites them to come here. Ahehi Zahum Bamho. And, you know, they promised they would come when we asked them, and they do come. And all of these Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all the beings of their mandalas, but most especially the energetic essence of all the Taras comes into the mandala that we're visualizing, and they all become one. And then we ask the awakened ones for purification on Sarva Tathagata Avashitsaman. And here I like to remind myself and all of us, this idea of purification is not, oh, you know, we're nasty or dirty and we need to get cleaned up. It's more like, oh gosh, we really get stuck with some difficult energetic knots, and we need to be released from those. So when we ask for this kind of purification, we imagine these incredible dakinis, these female, powerful female energies that can move from one place to the next instantaneously. They're carrying white vases, and as we've asked the awakened ones for purification, we imagine that there's a dakini standing in front of us and pouring this incredible nectar into our open crown chakra. So it's like liquid light. So try to imagine that any way you can. You might even be able to have a kinesthetic imagination of what it would feel like to just have this river of light pouring through you, comforting and kind of pulling out and extracting any kind of negative, stuck energies that we may have picked up from anywhere, reading our email, watching the news, whatever, reading the paper. Yeah. And to let yourself just relax and feel open and tended to, and to let this river of light flow through you and carry all that stuff out, and then it's leaving through the lower doors. And then we imagine one of these dakinis is pouring that same substance into the open crown chakra of orange Tara. And this one drop overflows and forms the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of infinite light, just above her crown. So he appears in a subtle body of red light. And this is a place where I like to encourage people to make what I call personal offerings. Like if there's something you really want to offer Tara, it could be something beautiful, amazing, fantastic. It could be something a project you're hoping to do. You can offer her some things you did that you wish you hadn't, or some things you can't quit thinking about that you wish you could. You can just offer her everything because she's just, she's like the mother that can take it all. And actually, she's pretty delighted. Like if we offer it to her, then we're really saying to her, this is yours for transformation. So we just offer her everything. And she's happily taking all of our offerings and then transforming them into blessings. And often I think of them as wisdom blessings or insights, that we kind of get an idea of what these things are about that we're offering her, what they might be about. And we just, let ourselves receive these wisdom blessings, pouring out. It's like the stuff of our own lives has been transformed into a blessing. And it really empowers us to then really pass those blessings along into the world, maybe even tonight or tomorrow. And then we do the more traditional offering practice, Benzam Ritu Kundali, Hana Hana Hampe, Om Sabhawa Shuddha, Saradharma Sabhawa Shuddhoham. So here we're imagining this blue wrathful deity Amrita Kundali emerging from our hearts in this sort of blue wrathful form. And his job is pretty much like Ganesh in Hinduism. He's the remover of all obstacles. So some of the obstacles he removes are to our imagination, our obstacles to openness. Like, I'm not sure I really understand what this is all about, but I'm kind of open to the experience and to learning. And also he removes the obstacles to our imagination of the offerings that we can give to Tara in our imagination. So he does that. He removes all those obstacles. He loves it. It's his job. And then he dissolves back into our heart chakra where he remains as a protector. And then we revisit one more time this image of vast space of emptiness, shunyata. And we imagine the syllable Om, which is the syllable of awakened consciousness, just resonating through all of space and actually matter. And as the syllable Om is just resonating through space, it's creating these beautiful jeweled vessels. You can picture them as large as you like in any way that you like. And each one of them has an Om inside of it. And from these vessels are pouring these offering substances, these traditional offering substances of flowers, music, incense, candles, food, music. It's like we're imagining this incredible banquet of these phenomenally beautiful offering substances all being laid out for Tara and the enlightened ones. And we see them pouring out clear, unhindered, and unending. Om Aham, Om Aham, Om Aham. Om Aryatara, Sapariwara, Argam, Pajam, Puspe, Dupe, Alake, Genje, Navaje, Shabda Pratitye, Soha. That's Sanskrit for all those offering substances. And so if you have the praise wherever you are, even if you're muted, we can read it together. I praise the one who is radiant with the light of her two eyes, full like the sun and moon, who eliminates the fiercest epidemics by reciting Hara 2 times and Tutari. And then the visualization, which I just love, honestly, because here you can really use your imagination. Again, whether you can really see this or not, you can still imagine it. That from her heart and from this vase, that these orange rays of light are streaming out. And as that's happening, these countless forms of Tara are appearing. I mean, they're beyond, there's infinite forms of Tara. Peaceful and wrathful, they can be as tiny as a cell, they can be as huge as a mountain. You know, you just can really imagine all these forms of Tara. And every single one of them is emanating rays of light and nectar. And so what's happening, because we have both the peaceful and the wrathful forms, the people who respond to the peaceful forms, or the beings who have caused disease, their mind become happy and filled with loving kindness. They just go back to their own realms. And then the wrathful Taras appear to banish the beings from the area who have caused illness but don't respond to pacification. So that's complicated. But I just invite you to have this idea, this orange rays of light just pouring out, creating all these Taras, and it's just multiplying, you know, more light, more nectar. And it's pacifying beings that respond to pacification and actually really putting up severe boundaries and banishing the ones who don't respond to pacification. So she's our boundary setting aspect here. And so let's do this mantra. And again, you're welcome to listen or recite, you know, stay muted, but do whatever works best for you. We're going to do it 108 times, and then we're going to rest in silence. And then we'll come back together. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Tur Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tari Sora Vijadi Zor Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sora Vijdi Zora Prasha Mani Soha. Om Tari Tutari Sarva Vijati Zor Prashamani 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 Soha. So as we're sitting in this silence, but also the reverberation of the mantras, and also the container that our intentions have created. You know, if you think there are 30 some odd people on this call, and that's 33 right now, it's been more, but 33 times the teachers that each one of us have. All these loving beings that we've called into our space, some of whom we can only imagine, but some of whom we have direct connections with. And to imagine that we really are intending to connect with awakened consciousness, both within ourselves and with each other and with the larger world. The practice is really about connecting. And in case of, having a really rough time of it sometimes, which I am certainly, I think we all are, it can be a time of reconnecting. To imagine this orange Tara sending out all of these emanations of herself into the world, into space. To imagine that we have all the help we could possibly need, but we really have to ask for it. And you don't know the form it'll come in, Might not look like Tara, but it might be Tara in an interesting form. I keep seeing those little hummingbirds, But I really hope, deeply hope, that you might feel, sense the reality that every time you connect or reconnect, that energy is going out into the world, and it may be helping somebody else connect or reconnect, and you don't even know them. That this is one of the things that we can do during this time for ourselves and for all beings. And that's one of the ways that we can protect from all these various forms of epidemics. It's one of the ways to address them all. And so there's a lot, a lot contained here. And so now we're gonna do the closing part of the practice. We're going to start by imagining orange Tara receding back into her place in the mandala, just taking her place among all the other emanations. And we're going to invite all of our teachers and all these beings that we've invited to come and be with us and support us and also receive, and ask them to all return to whatever realms they came from. Thank them for coming, and deep bow to them, and then ask them to return to wherever they came from. And then we look again at this whole mandala of Tara, all of the emanations with green Tara in the middle, and just imagine that entire mandala concentrating into green Tara and then seeing green Tara dissolve into light. So that what we end up with is this incredible shower of light going out into the universe. Also comes into us. It joins the light of Tara that's already in our own hearts, just really magnifies that, sends that through our whole body. We just imagine that light never goes out. We can connect with that for ourselves and for others. And so now we're back where we started, it's with space, looking out at space. And so in this moment, we dedicate this practice. We really just pray and intend that whatever benefit, whatever positive potential, whatever good energy has been generated by doing this practice together, we dedicate it towards the healing and awakening of all beings everywhere, with no exception. You can send it particularly if there's someone you've been thinking about, some people, some one person, some being, send it to them. And we do that, we just dedicate the practice to the healing and awakening of all beings with no exceptions. And we give thanks. for Tara and the teachers and the practice and for each other. And that we all decided to show up and to see and be seen. And here we are. I want to I just want to say that if you have a question, this would be a good time to ask it. I think I saw a question in here somewhere of if anyone had ever looked at the correspondence between Jewish mysticism and the Shekinah and Tara. I want to say the answer to that is yes. And I don't think I have time to say a whole lot about that, but I do want to say if anyone's interested in that connection, the general connection of Jewish mysticism to Vajrayana Buddhism, I would recommend this book called The Jew and the Lotus. It was written, I don't know, 30 years ago maybe, about this 11 rabbis, including Reb Zalman, who went to Dharamsala to meet with His Holiness for about 10 days. At His Holiness' invitation, he figured the Jewish people had gotten a take on how to live in exile and keep their tradition alive. So he asked them to come to Dharamsala and to teach him what might we do to keep our tradition alive. It's a wonderful book. It's still in print. And there's a chapter in that book called The Angel of Tibet Meets the Angel of the Jews. I think that's the title of it. And there's a lot of teachings actually that Reb Zalman gave to His Holiness about the correspondence between these two traditions. So that's a good place to start. And Cindy commented about how amazing it is that the orange cat walked by the screen. And so the orange cat is now right here lying on top of my paper. This is Bodhi. This is the cat who went on a little walkabout and scared the you-know-what out of me, but came home. And he just needed to be right in the thick of things. So here he is, talk about an emanation of Tara. Anyway, I would really welcome anyone's questions or comments, actually. Carol Ann, or Carol, do you like to be called Carol Ann, or do you prefer to be called Carol?
Just Carol.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought you might find this interesting, and you may very well already know it, but there is an extract out of a book, How to Free Your Mind, from Tara the Liberator.
Okay.
And it's about orange Tara.
Huh.
And it says, when we're ill, thinking of both the fierce and peaceful aspect of Tara and reciting both mantras are helpful. And this meditation is good for illnesses such as cancer aid, environmental pollution, new diseases that are appearing now, and illnesses that are difficult to cure. And she says in Chinese and Tibetan medicine, illnesses are either heating or cooling, which we know.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's a cooling illness and one has too much cooling energy, then meditate on the fierce Tara with her right eye, like the sun, and it heats you up.
Huh.
And if you have too much heat energy, then meditate on the peaceful Tara with her left eye like the moon. And this is cooling, just like moonbeams are cooling. Wow. So imagining such light coming into you, or whoever is sick, curing the illness. It's interesting, isn't it?
That's wonderful. And, you know, that's why I love looking at these different sources. And that book's been out for a while.
So I believe, and I haven't got it. And I normally get books, but I haven't got this.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that, Carol.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I did want to mention this. I told you I'm going to do it so I don't forget it. I want to mention this book. and actually to say her whole title is the Reverend Dr. Barbara Holmes. It's called Crisis Contemplation. It's just an astonishing book. And as I said, she's an African-American theologian. And she really teaches about the contemplative tradition in the Black church. And she talks about what happens. The crisis is not just to a person, but to the village. And so I just wanted to read one paragraph from this book. I'm not kidding. It would be hard to choose a single paragraph to read. But anyway, I just wanted to read this. A crisis forces those caught in its clutches to come to terms with the fact that life as we knew it may never be the same. When the crisis strikes, the response from the village must be a pause. There's little we can do, but we can be, we can listen, we can love our neighbors, and we can host the spirit that flutters over every dawning day. So she does talk about the intersectionality of all these epidemics, pandemics, etc. But and here's a traditional African wisdom saying, the times are urgent, let us slow down. So I think we can feel that can feel counterintuitive to us Western folks. We want to speed up and do something. This invitation to slow down and be and contemplate and meditate. Anyway, I wanted to mention this book. Some of you might enjoy reading it. And so I wonder if anybody else has a comment or a question.
Hi, I will. It's Kylie.
Okay.
I'm finding that my practice is becoming stale. I read a paragraph from Thich Nhat Hanh saying that, repetitive, ritualistic can become stale. And I think that's kind of what's happening with me. So I've started, like when I first found Tara, I did one every day. And now I've come back to doing that because I've sort of been a bit slack, and then realized that some years ago I did like a 21-day brain retrain to, create new neural pathways.
Wow.
And now I'm sort of thinking I'm going to do that with these mantras, have a new mantra, a fresh mantra every day, and have it going around in my head when I wake up with anxiety in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
And it's working. It's kind of working. I've still got, major issues, but I just thought that was interesting. The 21-day, it takes 21 days to create a new neural pathway. And this woman had MRI photos of new neural pathways being developed in the brain. And because I love things being backed with science as well because of my doubting heart. So I just thought it's fabulous that the 21 days or 21 taras sort of helps me to bring a freshness back into it, because I got a bit jaded for a while there.
That's wonderful. I mean, and Kylie too, you can sort of change it up a little bit too, like if going outside or I don't know, sometimes I think especially in the middle of the night too, but just a couple of things that this teacher Zazek Rinpoche, I really appreciated some teachings he gave on the 21 taras according to Surya Gupta. Anyway, he talked about how important malas are to Tibetans, and like to his grandmother never was without a mala. And he said, I think he actually said something like this, your mala can be like a blankie and you should take it to bed with you. It's your bed, right? And I do think sometimes we have these instincts. Sometimes I just have the Tara cards right there beside me, or the mala, as you all have heard talk
they
about.
Are within reach.
Huh?
They are within reach of my bed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And to really treat those things as the
Comforter.
psychological language we call as transitional objects, you know, like where love is embedded in the objects. And if you do use a mala
Nice.
and they're stones, you know, if you've ever thought about what stones contain, they supposedly contain everything that's ever happened in their presence. So, you know, all these recitations of these mantras are in these beads. Anyway, I'm talking more. I want to know if anybody else wants to say anything or has a question. And I appreciate these comments that you all are putting in here.
Just one quick thought.
Okay.
I just wanted to say thank you for making a reference to the James Webb photographs from NASA, because I feel like I had this mind-blowing experience watching them. And especially when they showed that one with the caption of, and then this is 90 zillion light years and 400 billion, so whatever's, and the very farthest image you can see, that's not there anymore. And it was so expansive and really helped me with this practice. It reminded me of how we go to that place of spaciousness. And I typically think of this blue sky outside, you know, but now I'm in that, you know, kind of psychedelic, supercalifragilistic pictures that are just so wild. So anyway, I'm really glad you brought them up, because they've been enormously helpful to me in my visualizing this time. So anyway, thanks as always.
Thank you, Tricia. Thank you for mentioning that. And it is getting late, and I know that people need to go, and you know, wherever we are, we might want to get some rest. But it is wonderful to hear from you. And I'm just going to say, if one more person wants to say something, that's great. And if not, we will sign off for tonight. I do.
Would you say the name of that photographer again, or put it in the chat?
You mean the James Webb?
Yeah. Okay. I don't know about that. All right. Thank you. That's good.
Okay.
I will
yeah.
say something.
Okay.
I was talking with my grandson about his father, and I recognized that a fixated pattern of thought had arisen within me, and which was harmful. And I had heard Carolyn May say that she takes her harmful thoughts to her prayers, and I like that. So I went to my journals, started journaling, and when I'd written out as much as I could write out, I then did the short practice that your Lama in Switzerland gave us, those that attended the initiation last year. And I did that, and by the time I just did it to Green Tara because I didn't know which one to pick. I just said, she's got them all.
She does.
So I just went to her and I did the practice. And by the time the practice was over, it felt like the fixated pattern had been completely removed.
Wow.
To me, it's a miracle.
Yeah.
And I know it's back there waiting to pounce. So I just say a mantra every time I feel it's starting to get in. But this is just miraculous as far as I'm concerned.
That's wonderful, Susan. And the reason I'm laughing is because I'm thinking about the Buddha and the Maras. You know, it's like the famous story of his enlightenment where I'll tell it, maybe I'll tell it next time, but all the Maras disappear at the moment of his enlightenment. But, you know, then you read the stories for 40 years after that and they all come back. So it's not like, oh yeah.
Right.
They're under the bed. But the mantras are also in the heart and the head, so they can be under the bed. That's fine, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you for that story, for all of it. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And
thank you so much for all that you give us.
Well, thank you, and thank you all really for your incredible generosity and your presence, and for the cat. Yeah, it's just wonderful to see you, and I wish you all just as good a month as you can possibly have. I do want to say these are tough times. These are really tough times, and the intersectionality of the big picture with our small pictures can be very, very, very difficult. No joke. So we need all the help we can get. And we are part of each other's help. So thank you all and see you next month. Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good
Thank
night,
you.
everyone. Thank you.
Rachel. Good night.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you all.
Good night. Take care.
Mhm.